I'm going to kick this off with some introductions. So thanks everybody for joining the webinar today. This webinar is specifically about how we can better use smartphones on job sites. A lot of the emails that we sent out, we talked about the fact that computers are what helped us get to the moon, and the smartphone that we carry around in our pocket is more sophisticated and more powerful than the computer that helped us get to the moon. So if computers could do that for us back then, why aren't we better using our smartphones now? And so we had David Wilder join us. David is the CFO of Zander Solutions. David is a user of Foundation software as well as BusyBusy. And so David, if you'll tell us how long you've been at Zander, what you did before that, a little bit about yourself and your current role there, that'd be great.
Sure, thanks, Derek. So as Derek said, I'm the CFO, Zander Solutions. I've been at Zander for just over 2 years now as their CFO. Immediately prior to joining Zander, I was actually running a nonprofit organization for 5 years. But prior to that, I was the controller of another construction and consulting firm that built wind and solar farms across the United States. So live in Wisconsin, from Wisconsin, go Badgers.
There you go. And David and I met just about a year ago. It was right before the big COVID crash at a trade show. So,
that's right.
Pretty wild there. And then Eric Vittardi is with us as well. Eric is representing from the Foundation team, that partnership that we've got there.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Derek. So again, my name is Eric Vittardi. I'm the market development manager here at Foundation Software. I've been with the family of companies for about 8 years now. Previously managed payroll for construction, our sister company. That's a payroll service just for construction. I believe that's the tag. So other than that, no, now my role is focused on finding partnerships that can help us create a better environment for our clients. So we can find solutions that round out their needs as a whole. That's most of what my focus on, and obviously that's how we connected, Derek. Thank you for having me, and pleasure to do some more work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the audience that we have today, we've got a lot of people who are Foundation users looking to learn more about how to use BusyBusy or other smartphone technologies. We've got a lot of people who are looking at BusyBusy and Foundation, trying to learn best practices as far as accounting softwares for construction, as well as smartphone usage. And super, super excited that David was willing to join us today. As I mentioned, David and I met, so I met both the CEO and CFO of Zander Solutions at this trade show about a year ago. And we connected pretty quickly on what BusyBusy could do for their business. But David, one thing I had never even asked you up until this point, when you guys were at that trade show last year, were you guys looking for a solution for labor management, time tracking, or what were you guys there looking for?
Yeah, we were. One of our primary goals was to try to identify an electronic timekeeping solution. So, we walked around the trade show and obviously heard from a lot of different companies. And obviously, ultimately, we settled on BusyBusy, or you wouldn't be having me here today. But yeah, that was a primary goal of us going. One of the goals was trying to figure out a software solution to solve our timekeeping needs.
Okay. And you guys, before implementing BusyBusy, what were you guys doing for time tracking before that?
Sure. So prior to that, Zander had just been using paper timesheets. So we have about 90 field employees. Everyone would fill out a paper timesheet each day. So the payroll person would review, hand key, organize, sort, figure out people's handwriting, 500 different sheets of paper every week. So that's what we were doing. I think there's maybe 3 people left that are holding out.
So who loves us more, the CFO that gets all the data that's way better and way cleaner to rely on, or the people that had to do payroll before that don't have to deal with paper anymore?
Yeah, well, so I would say that obviously our payroll person, he's very happy with the idea of not having to rekey and decipher people's handwriting. But after some immediate hurdles and adapting to a new system is change is difficult for folks. But I'd say 95% of our employees now that they're using BusyBusy. If they were first reluctant to switch, they're fine with it now and actually agree that it's a better system. So
So you said 2 or 3 holdouts of the rest of the 90, the 87 that are now on BusyBusy. Would any of them go back to paper?
I don't think so. I mean, we were talking about that as a management team the other day. I think that if we said we were going to get rid of this timekeeping system, go back to paper, I think people would, logically they'd think we were crazy. And two, they'd be frustrated by it. I mean, they like the simplicity of just having to, they all carried their phone to begin with. So not having to carry around a piece of paper and a pencil and figure it out at the end of the day, they just sort of record their time throughout the day. I think they all agree that it's a lot nicer.
So we've got a pretty solid audience in here. I would guess there's probably quite a few of them who are still using paper. So I'm sure there were quite a few who sat up in their chair when they said that. The other thing that makes you guys so interesting that I hadn't realized until I reached out and said, hey, would you do this? Is you guys recently over the past year, after rolling out BusyBusy, you acquired another company. They weren't on paper. They were using software time tracking. So throughout this webinar, if you will, touch on both. It's such an interesting case study for us and for this audience to be able to hear, because you can tell the story of people that switched from another app over to BusyBusy, and then you can tell the story of people who switched from paper to BusyBusy. But before we get too far into that and talking about the smartphone thing, I am curious, just for, again, part of the audience, how long have you guys been using Foundation software?
Zander's been on Foundations. This is coming up in their 5th year, I believe. So it was they were already using it when I started, and I think they've been using it for 3 years since then, so 5 years now. So.
Okay, cool. Do you?
Yeah, and I won't have too much to speak. I'll probably pop in here and there. The stars of the show are obviously David and Derek. But if anyone has any questions or anything like that, my information will be provided at the end of the show or at the end of the webinar. We're happy to provide it. But more than anything, again, I just want to throw another thank you out there so that our clients that are on here, our Foundation clients that are on here, hopefully you guys can learn some things, and hopefully we can provide, another solution for you, another tool in the tool belt to make lives easier. And I will mention, as David was saying, as far as making lives easier, what I've heard from some clients that have made the conversion to a mobile timekeeping solution is hiring's been a lot easier for them too. And you guys may hit on that at some point later. I'm taking this on a little bit of a side note here, but as the workforce is changing a little bit and people are having a harder and harder time finding qualified employees, a lot of them are really interested in embracing new technology. And I don't know, I think if you're looking for a new laborer or whatever position you need to fill, I think if I can go over here and I can use a mobile timekeeping solution, or I got to do things on paper here, I think it shows a lot, and it definitely gives you a leg up on that side too. And you guys I may be, taking this off on a sidetrack, but it's worth mentioning that you had some good points.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Eric. And it's not something that I had considered, but it is something that wasn't in any of the email content, but I think it's worth mentioning. One of the things that we commonly hear is from a lot of our customers is their hiring has become a lot easier. Attracting new talent, it has become a lot easier. They get a lot more referrals of people who start working at their company and then say, hey, this company, they seem to have their stuff a little bit more together. They're using technologies to track things. It makes my life a lot easier. Again, people sometimes the first couple of days may be begrudging to the idea of having to use something, and then they all of a sudden, you try to take it away 6 months later, people aren't going to go back to it. People don't like paper. They've never liked paper. You think about the dentist office, anywhere that you're going now, when you get to walk in and you can check in with an iPad or your phone, it just makes you feel a little more at ease, like you're working with a company that's on the up and up, and it's been a really good thing that we've seen and heard a lot from. Have you had any of that, David, where you've had specific references or anything that you could speak to as far as employees using smartphones and some feedback on that side?
I think in terms of new hires, I guess I'm not quite sure how much it's made a difference for folks that we're trying to attract. I would say that we're in a growth mode. We're talking to a lot of different potential acquisition targets, and when we come to the table now and say that we're a prospective target company, I should say that just having this software in place it makes everybody feel like it could be a better fit. Particularly if we're acquiring a company that's already using some type of electronic timekeeping system. If we tell them we're using paper, that's kind of a pause in the conversation. So
that makes sense. That makes sense. So tell me, so you came to the trade show, you were looking to implement a software to, what were you looking for? What were you trying to increase? What were you trying to improve? And why were you trying to get off paper?
yeah, so our biggest obviously paper is just sort of inherently cumbersome, especially when you start talking about the volume that we were dealing with. And so there was that efficiency standpoint and that accuracy standpoint. We were also, looking to get just a better, more accurate handle on time in general, where people were spending their time, how they were spending their time. Not that we thought that there was some sort of, employees were doing anything wrong, but we knew we needed better data about the business. And it really gets down to efficiencies. We knew that the way we were operating, the way employees were going about their day to day was costing us more money. It wasn't adding value to the customer. And so by implementing an electronic timekeeping system, and BusyBusy made this easy to do, is we changed the way we were asking employees to track their time. So when they came to the shop in the morning, they were logging into shop. When they got in their trucks to travel, they were traveling. And when they got to the job sites, they were logging into the job site, right? You couldn't add that complexity with paper. If you're just asking people to write down that much more information, you just wouldn't get it. Previously, people would just write down whatever job they went to that day. But the reality is our customers only pay us for, in our case, we're waterproofers. We only get paid for putting stuff on a wall. And what we found once we used BusyBusy for a while is 30 to 40% of our employees' time was not putting stuff on walls. And that was adding up to about $1 million a year. And so since implementing BusyBusy, we had the data to take the management team and the supervisors to say, we got to eliminate this. We got to at least cut it down. We're not going to get to zero, but we got to cut it way down, at least in half. And so since the summer, when we implemented BusyBusy, we've been gradually implementing new processes to reduce that time. And we've probably gotten it down to about 20%. Sometimes, some weeks it's below 15%. And so you extrapolate that time over a labor force of nearly 100 people, that's real dollars. That's hard for any of the supervisors or management team to argue with in terms of the value. So that's the advantage that we've found, really what we've settled to do. And so that's kind of the success story that we found with it.
Yeah, and that was when we spoke last week, and I just reached out to you and said, hey, how's it going? How's the implementation going? How's the process going? I mean, when you told me that you guys had found that you were tracking $1 million in non-value time, and that you strongly felt like you could cut that in half, that was when I'm like, yeah, this is the guy, this is the story that we need people to hear, because so many people who are on this webinar and just out in the workplace, they're wondering, okay, well, if I want to use BusyBusy or anything else, what should I be tracking? How do I actually find the dollar saved? Because everybody wants to improve, but part of the story that I really want is, how do these companies improve? Did you go into it knowing, okay, it's non-value time, that's our target, that's what we want to do? Or did you start tracking stuff first and then realize that's where you want to improve? Like, can you take us a little bit through the process to help people understand, how do they identify their losses, and how do they make those corrections? And then what's the response from the team? And how are you motivating the team to help you track that stuff better?
Yeah, I think that, where it started is, myself and the other senior managers at Zander, we'd come in the morning, we would see employees wandering about, sort of it was a little chaotic here in the morning, right? And there was sort of a frustration of like, gosh, it just feels like we're not being efficient. We would have meetings after meetings, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, with supervisors of the management team trying to say like, hey, we think we need to do something better. And what we really found in the end is like, we need a better way to quantify this. We need to figure out, are we just crazy? Like, is this not really an issue? or is this really an issue? And so that's what sort of led us down the path of like, we need to get the tools to track data better, right? And so we went into the electronic timekeeping system with that approach. Like we were going to start tracking time better. And we knew that trying to ask people to do it on paper wouldn't work. Like we wouldn't get accurate information to be able to make decisions off of. So we definitely approached that. And when we set up our, call it timekeeping methodology, it was really just thinking about, how are we measuring value add to a customer, right? It's not that our employees were necessarily spending their time in the wrong way. It's just about what's the most efficient way we need them to be spending their time in order to add value to the customer, which means we get work done faster, we do it cheaper, we do it more efficiently. And it's not even about eliminating hours from employees. Our employees still work a full day. They're just going to go right to the job site now versus coming here, right? And there's more data on that, and some of the geo tracking and BusyBusy allows us to see where jobs are, see where employees are at. So we definitely went into it with that approach, and I think that's what I would highly recommend anybody do, is really think about there's some line between the effort it takes to track data and that cost and the value you're going to get out of it. When Zander was a smaller company, it probably wasn't as effective because there was fewer employees. It was easier to keep track of in that situation. But as you grow, that inefficiency factor just grows exponentially. It gets, there's some tipping point where you're just going to start, losing a lot of money by not being more efficient and implementing some of these improvements. So.
Well, and it's interesting because we've got clients that are all different sizes, and you see some who get big enough that they finally get tired of all of the waste, and then you see others who are small and they want to grow. I mean, we have a company who adopted our technology about a year ago. They had 21 employees, and now today they're at 43 employees, and they attribute all of that to being able to do job costing on their job sites because of the smartphone, where they're getting there, they're tying the information to a project, and they're able to execute on it, where they're having their guys clock in. It's an electrical company, so they're having their guys clock into a specific project, saying whether they're doing rough or finish. And then because of the photos as well, they're taking photos of where they're pulling the wire to. So then when the guys get in and do the finish work, they're able to see exactly where the wires were pulled. So all of the work improves. It allowed them to double in size. Their payroll went from taking an entire day to less than an hour, even though they're double the size. And then we've got other companies who they're 10 employees and they want to stay at 10 employees. They're just tired of working so hard for so few dollars, and they want to improve the profitability. So I think your story is really, really interesting in that yours is that first that we mentioned, where it's like, hey, we kept getting bigger and bigger and realized like at some point you just can't tolerate that loss. So to show the audience a little bit here, just what that looks like from a clocking in, clocking out perspective. Somebody gets to a job site. The nice thing on a smartphone with this technology is there's geofences around everything. So walking us through the way that your guys are using it to give the audience a little bit of perspective, you said guys are getting to the shop and they're clocking into the shop. Is that correct?
Correct.
So what they do here is they're clocking in, the project is the shop, and then the cost code. Do you have that labeled as the shop too, or what do you label?
We have it overhead, and then we'd have a separate cost code for travel. So okay. They switch cost codes when they're traveling.
Okay. So in this case, if this, we'll say Sheridan's the shop, and the first one that they would clock into when they get there to the office is overhead. And then once they're leaving, the nice thing about this is it all is all geofence related. And so it will remind them when they get to the shop to clock in. It will also remind them to switch to travel when they leave. But it sounds like, and you tell me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, because your guys, anytime they switch a location, they're switching a cost code. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's really how we just drilled it into people to communicate it. You change your location, you change your punch. Okay. And after 2 weeks, 99% of people get it.
So even with 90 employees, it took you about 2 weeks to go from completely paper to 87 of the 90 guys 100% on the app, and everybody was up and running. You were pretty close to error free. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we broke our 90 into like 3 different groups of people, and so each group took about 2 weeks to get on, and that was just from our own management time. But yeah, essentially each group of employees took 2 weeks to figure it out.
Cool. Okay. And we hear that from a lot of people generally, especially if they're doing it where it's, hey, if you change your location, you change your punch, then when you're going to get in your truck, it's really easy to remember. What generally helps that adoption in that first 2 weeks when people are saying, I'm just reluctant to roll it out, is that reminder of the geofence that as they're driving out of the office, then they're going to get that ping on the location saying, hey, it looks like you're leaving the shop. Do you want to update your location? And then they would just come here to the cost code. And in your case, they're going to choose travel. And that's your non-value time, right? So you're tracking everything non-value to shop and travel. And then once they're on the job site, you're having them track it specific to that project. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. And then to the type of work they're doing, which, yeah.
Okay. So what else? Tell us from a smartphone perspective. Are you guys using photos on your projects, or what else are you using inside the product that's helped you guys accelerate your profit, and reduce your loss?
Yeah, I think photos is probably the other biggest thing from a control factor that's helping us, I guess, prevent losses would be it. So a lot of the work we do gets buried. So we go and we waterproof, and then it gets backfilled, and you can't, no one knows what it looks like anymore. And so our field staff has gotten really good at taking pictures before and after they're on a site. And particularly our supervisors will ask them to make sure if it's a specific detail that oftentimes causes problems, specifically, take several pictures of those details of the work that we did, so that a few months down the road, if there's ever a leak or there's an issue, we've got that documentation to show that, we did our scope of work correctly. And if there's an issue, likely it was another trade that came in and damaged our work. And Derek, after you and I talked yesterday, I went and talked to the manager of that group and asked, and he rattled off several different examples within the past few weeks where they've been able to go back, pull the pictures up from BusyBusy, share those with the general contractor, and basically point out that, hey, we left the site, everything looked good. Somebody came and damaged our work, and so we're happy to fix it, but it's going to be a change order. And so that's been huge. I mean, it's just been and honestly, the field employees really like that, because they like to be able to show and prove that the work they did was good quality. They take pride in what they do, and so they enjoy the ability to take a picture. And even if it's not a situation where we're really concerned about mitigating loss, I think the field employees really enjoy the idea of, like, here's what the site looked like before I got there. This is the work product that I put on. And so there's this element of being able to share with their supervisors that, yeah, they're doing a good job. They're working efficiently. They're getting the work done that day. And so that's the picture's really been huge, and it's easy for the guys to take, attach to jobs. And so they really like that functionality.
That's awesome. I'd be curious in a year to follow up with you on the increase of change order revenue that you guys have gotten. That's another story we've been able to hear from a lot of clients. That's pretty cool, is they're able to better track extras and change orders. And a lot of it comes down to that photo documentation, and they'll see their percentage of change orders increase in revenue by 50%, 100%, because before you just had to go and fix it and it was on your dime. And now, like you're describing, all of a sudden these photos are reducing your liability. You're now able to show, like, hey, we did this and we did it right. Someone else messed this up. So you either got to find the sub that's going to mess it up and they're going to pay for it, or the GC covers it themselves. And then the scorecard thing, I love that you brought that up, because we hadn't talked about that. That's something that I've heard more and more. We actually had an excavation company that we were just recently talking to, and he was telling us, he's like, man, it's been really fun to see how much taking photos has changed the way my guys do their work, because they take so much more pride in their work, because the photos have kind of become a scorecard for them. And just for anybody on the webinar, one of the things David mentioned, how much easier this is with the photos. So if you'll notice up here on the phone, the really nice thing about the way that this works, it's the only time tracking software that I know of that has the ability to do photos this way, because it's its own section. So when somebody comes in and on their phone, they click on the photos are here, and I can just either select a photo from my library, or I can take a picture. But when I take that picture and I upload it, it's going to upload it specifically to that project. And when we go ahead and do that, that's already assigned. As you can see here, that's assigned to the project that it's on. It's all stored. It's automatically there. There's an entire note section in there. And then for the people back at the office, let me just jump over here. This is the new dashboard that we've just coming out with that you're taking a look at. And the photos would be here. Our old dashboard that is on our product where my phone is currently tied to would be here. But this entire section of photos and notes, you can filter this and you can look at those photos. You can see this is the most recent. They all come in chronological, so you can see the different employees that are taking stuff. This is another photo from Sheridan that an employee took this morning. And you can see the pride that employees would take on their work when they're uploading this type of documentation to a job site. And you can search these photos by employees. So you can see everything that Alexander's doing. You can check it by date, you can check it by project. So it's an entire section. And again, the entire objective here is when you really look at the pain of the industry, so many companies ask their employees to take photos, but then they have to text them. And then they're trying to get somebody to get them off phones and put them in folders or drop them in Dropbox. And there's just so many places where photos may or may not show up, that we're trying to make sure and change that for people, to have photos be in one place where your notes are, again, where change orders are tracked and everything like that, so that you're not carrying the liability that you had in the past. I want to jump back into what we were talking about here. So from a smartphone standpoint, we want to make sure that the audience gets the value out of understanding how smartphones can really impact their job site. So in order, David, talking about what you guys have implemented in the impact, you've got the non-value time that you're tracking. And to restate there, you found about $1 million in non-value time. You're looking to correct that at about 50%. And it sounds like with what you're doing, not just a goal, but if you've reduced it from 40% down to 20% of your total time, it sounds like you guys are actually doing that over the next year you will hit that target. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we'll hit that target and probably beat it. And you don't really consider, I mean, we're spending significantly more time on our projects as well. So it's not just eliminating cost, it's generating more revenue, it's reducing the number of vehicles we have. So there are other costs that it's taking out of the business or adding to revenue that aren't even really captured in that million. So we're seeing really positive results, and we're seeing good buy-in from the employees.
Okay. And then from a liability standpoint, something that we hear from people a ton is how much we impact their liability by reducing it drastically from an employee level, from a customer level, from a GC level, because of our daily reports, because of the photos and notes, because of the safety reporting, the clock out questions. We talked about photos and how that's helping you a ton with liability stuff. I think when we got cut off, I was saying that we have an excavation company, and the guy had been talking a lot about how our product has helped his employees take pride in their work, and that it's become a scorecard for them. That a lot of them, when they're taking the pictures of the before and the after, it's showing the type of work that they do, in addition to reducing their liability. Similar to what you're describing in their situation, they bury a lot of their work. One of the clients of ours recently had told us about a lawsuit that they had sent over to them. They immediately were able to pull up the photos from that project. export them all, send it over to that attorney, and the lawsuit went away before it even started because their work was buried and they didn't have to go back out and dig it up because they showed that they had done it the right way. What else in Zander specifically, what liability stuff are you guys managing with either the clock out questions or anything else that you guys are doing that the audience could hear how you guys are navigating that with smartphones?
So I think that the next piece that we're really pushing for relates to that, the question about were they injured while they were at work today. It actually just came up in some operations meetings this morning. We're going to start incorporating that into weekly or biweekly dashboards that we're putting together for health and safety. But the one thing we did notice is that since implementing BusyBusy, all of our employees every single day have indicated that they were not injured working. And so it's a little bit of a culture change. And I think if we looked at our paper timesheets, there was a checkbox that said probably, yeah, they weren't injured that day. And so we're going to just start pushing the culture because they get this question every time they punch out, every time they clock out for the day. And so really trying to emphasize with employees that, look, if they get injured, whether they just get a scrape, if they have to put a Band-Aid on it, they need to just say that they got injured. If they rolled their ankle, something. We know that there are those minor incidences happening. And we're going to really emphasize and push our employees that we want them to report that. We want them to tell us what happened, even if it's minor, right? Because it's all those minor incidences that contribute to that one major incident that we're all trying to avoid. Obviously, we're trying to avoid them all, but it's really those major lost time, significant cost. And so, by using that question and really telling employees and making sure our supervisors make employees say yes, even if it's a minor injury, we can help push just being more mindful about safety down into the organization and make it a much more day-to-day cultural thing for our company. And like I said, we'll pull that out. We'll sort the information by division, and we can sort of see what's going on at a more real time related to how our workers are doing. So that's the next big initiative we're pushing with using with BusyBusy to just get a better handle on making the culture and how we approach our day-to-day much better.
Okay. And just to show the audience here what David's talking about here on clock out, when people clock out, the nice thing is you can manage a lot of your liability right here. So on clock out, first question that can be asked is, were you injured? Now this text underneath it is customizable, so you can write that based on how you want your company to navigate this. If you were injured in a job-related accident or witness an injury of a job-related accident, please report it to the safety coordinator. Some people will write, please follow normal safety protocols. The nice thing with this injury is it does send notifications. So the office would get notified immediately. Did you say, David, you have or have not received any of those notifications?
We have received those notifications, and either our HR person or our health and safety person is expected to reply out to the management team after they followed up with that employee. Unfortunately, fortunately, I should say, when that happens, it's usually somebody they're just moving through the prompts very quickly and they're just clicking no, or they're clicking yes, I should say, out of just moving too quickly, right? So they always come back. I always get an email then from our health and safety person saying, they followed up with the person and it was a miss punch, so to speak. But that's where it really prompted the conversation of, well, they can't all be no's. Some people have to be getting at least minorly injured. We're in construction, like somebody's cutting their finger. We know that's happening. So which led to the conversations actually this morning on it. So we're gonna push to use this a lot more and use it to collect a lot more data about smaller incidents. Because obviously for larger stuff we were finding out about it, but it's that small stuff day to day that we're going to really use this to start tracking a lot better.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that we overlook a lot with technology. The time that it took you guys to grab that non-injury injury report and realize that there was something wrong with the way that people were reporting it. If you're doing that on paper, you're sorting through a year's worth of paper every single day, trying to figure out, was it keyed in wrong by your people? What does it look like? Whereas with this, And you can see here, not only from the phone standpoint, that it's really easy. People are marking, yes, I was injured. No, I was not. If they mark no, then it's here. But once they push submit, that information is sent in real time. So you can see this employee dashboard here. These are injuries the past 7 days. And this is something that from an office admin side, the office admin has all of this data at their fingertips, when you can change these widgets to be more customizable if you want to look at different reports. And then you can go into the actual reporting section as well, which again, if you jump over here and you take a look at this reports, there's an entire section right here of injury reports. And the thing that a lot of people overlook when they're trying to manage liability is, from a liability standpoint, yes, there's liability when people get injured. But one of the things that the way that we built this in our product with the software, it was very intentional that we wanted to make sure we were capturing non-injuries every day. Because where a lot of ownership, a lot of office staffs carry a ton of liability is if someone gets hurt or they don't get hurt, but they don't properly report it. And then 6 months later, they're no longer working at Zander. And they come back and say, well, I hurt my back and I told my supervisor, did he not report it? And the supervisor's telling David, I promise you, they didn't tell me anything. Well, then it's he said versus he said, and you're going back and forth. Workers' comp, they're not going to side with Zander Solutions saying, sorry, he didn't tell us. They're going to side on the employee or the past employee side of the guy saying, I got hurt 6 months ago and I told them and they didn't do anything. So when we consulted with a lot of injury attorneys about how to build this feature to best protect our clients, we got a lot of feedback saying you need to help companies capture every day that employees were not injured so they can't come back later and say that they were. Reduce the liability with a non-injury report is as impactful as capturing the actual injuries. And then you can see the anomalies like David's saying too, where you realize, hey, we have a problem. People aren't reporting this correctly. And it's done in a technology where you can run a report in 60 seconds and look at a year's worth of data. What about break policies and time accuracy, David? Do you guys in Wisconsin, do you guys do anything with breaks, requirements, anything that way?
We don't have a strict break policy, but it is something that, it's a perennial issue at Zander where we, every 3 months somebody will say, how come our employees aren't taking breaks, or because usually, it's a tendency for folks to work through lunch and things like that. And then there's the whole question about, is that accurate? And then is it safe to have people working full time? So, all I can say is whenever it's going to come up again in a few weeks or months, and I think that's when we'll sort of address it and figure it out. But we are able to track it. We're able to see certain groups of employees are taking breaks. We're able to measure that and see it. And so when we get to that issue again for the first time, we'll actually have real data to look at who's taking breaks and who isn't, how long those breaks are. And it's very easy for employees to take breaks. So in sense of sort of recording their break. So,
yeah. Well, and again, one of the nice things, especially as we transition and people start using this new dashboard more and more, is some of those things you'll start to see, because so much of management can happen in real time where you can see if there's any issues on anybody taking breaks or not, if anyone's reporting inaccurate time so that you can fix time cards live. The supervisors have the ability to do that. Based on how you set it up at a company level. You can manage overtime, which has been a big thing for a lot of our companies coming on recently, is getting feedback on when employees are hitting their overtime hours, trying to manage the overtime. You can see here with the photos, how many photos are being taken, when they're being taken. You can view all of those. So again, a lot of this is just as you transition from paper to technology, the visibility of what's going right becomes that much, everything gets put under a magnifying glass. If things are going well, you see it better than you ever have. And if things are going poorly, you see it better, quicker, and more magnified in a way that one of our onboarding specialists, Gordon, always talks about the fact that when he onboards a client, they very quickly either get more frustrated with some of the things they were frustrated about, or more happy with the things that they were happy about, because everything's put under a magnifying glass, which allows you to use technology to correct things quicker than they have been in the past. And hopefully while a job's still going, because using our budget reports and some of those things, you can see if your guys are logging too many hours on that project, if there's too much cost going to that project, and then you can pivot before it's too late, the project's over and you lost money and you didn't realize it until it was done. I want to wrap up there and move to more of a Q&A, but before we do, I want to see if there's anything else, David, that I should have asked you, anything else just from a standpoint of, for owners on this call, office admins on this call, accounting people, payroll, CFOs, anything else that you would say from a technology standpoint, smartphone adoption, that you would help them as they're considering adopting a similar technology?
I would just reiterate how valuable, we have found it. And like I said, I think there's elements to it, which, like I mentioned, there was safety reporting that we're really just getting into. And it's definitely an iterative process. And once you start using the technology, you'll sort of find, the right time for your company to adopt different technologies or different functionality within the app. In terms of getting the data into Foundations from BusyBusy, I'll just call it that we never had any trouble. I mean, it exports very easily. We just map it into a CSV file and it all goes very quickly. And then P4C and Foundations, does the payroll calculation. And so we've had no trouble with that integration whatsoever.
Okay. And along those lines, as you were talking about that integration and how the two products do work, we had a question come in asking if we were going to show how the two products work. So we do have a couple videos of that on our YouTube channel. Foundation has one on their website of how the two products work together. We will also send one out in an email to all of the attendees here. For time's sake, especially where we had that technology hiccup, which I, again, apologize. I'm not sure what happened with the Zoom webinar registration on that, but I want to be conscious of time here. And so we're not going to take the time to show how the two products do integrate today, but we will provide that information. I appreciate you bringing that up, David, that yeah, the products work really, really well together, even for larger companies like Zander Solutions. It's a really clean export import. Our onboarding specialists work through that with you to figure out what you want the import to look like. We don't have Eric's video back on. I think that's part of the technology issue that we were having.
I'm here though.
So, and Christy, are you also available? Do you have some questions where we could turn questions over to the audience and you could field some of the questions and ask Eric and David and myself some of the stuff that's come in?
Yeah, I sure do. One of the questions from Tammy Danko was a pretty simple question, but probably wondered by all. Do you have to integrate BusyBusy with some other program, or can you use it completely by itself?
It's used often by itself. That's completely up to the client that we're working with. So it's labor management and timekeeping. So that's the reason that we have products like the daily report inside the product, that we've built out this entire new dashboard, is because it does work as a standalone product for those who want to use it that way.
Perfect. And from Dylan Baker, he had a question for David on how soon after starting to use BusyBusy did you start to see savings?
I think that it took a few months for us to have the data. So first of all, we onboarded our group. I mean, I guess short answer, it really probably took 4 to 6 months to start to realize real savings, right? Because it took us a few months when we first kicked off to get everybody on board. And then it was a matter of having enough data to really prove out the idea that, yeah, there is a lot of non-value added time we're spending, and there's an opportunity to reduce it. It's not just that we were spending it, but there was that getting that alignment. So I mean but that has nothing to do with the product and much more to do with culture and people and just changing the mindset of coming to work. So, but I would say that since we've started, I mean, it's been really exponential, and the cultural, the buy-in has been fantastic, and it's one of those things that now that we've got a whole group of even down to the field staff thinking, you know, I mean, perfect examples. Initially, there was a lot of reluctance when we told them, hey, you're going to have to, you know, drive directly to the job site. And there was this initial reaction of, you're going to cut my hours, so you're going to pay me less. And it's like, no, we're just going to pay you for a full day, but you're going to be working, you know, at the job site the whole time. And as that's evolved, you know, they're excited because they just get to go home at the end of the day. You don't have to drive back to the shop, get in your car, and then drive back home. So it's been accelerating. So sorry, kind of a long answer, but more cultural than technology. So
it's a perfect answer. And we've actually had a bunch of other questions come in for you, David. Some of the stuff I had referenced earlier, and people had come back and asked if we were going to talk about it. So one person asked, hey, can David talk more about the two companies rolling it out with paper with Zander in comparison to the company that you acquired? And they're asking, what was the software that they were using? How was their transition to BusyBusy? Did they like it the same, more? Like, can you talk a little bit about that? And I think that got disrupted in our technology exchange. So yeah, if you could speak to that.
Sure.
Great.
They were using timesheets, I think. Timesheets online. T-sheets maybe.
Yeah, probably.
I can't remember the name. One of those two. One of them. Their adoption was, you know, instant. It was really like the management team up there rolled it out, and it was great. It was more user friendly on their phone. They were used to the idea of recording electronically, so they skipped that hurdle that some of the Zander employees had to overcome. But their adoption has been absolutely like seamless. Whereas I sort of described, it took kind of 2 weeks for folks here at Zander to really get a hold of it. For them, it was, you know, the first week they got it. There's almost no errors in their data entry ever. So it went very smooth.
I'm as curious as everybody else, and what was their feedback as far as comparing the two products? I mean, they like the functionality of BusyBusy is much easier. I mean, I think, and a lot of it, honestly, it comes back to things we addressed. Like the photos are just huge, because it allows, you know, you can describe the work that got done and the work remaining on a job much easier by taking a picture. Than you can by making a phone call or texting or things like that. So I mean, a lot of the functionality from the field staff comes back to ease of use of those pictures. I mean, it really is like it was one of those things where you didn't have to start asking people to take photos. They just noticed it and started doing it. Just, you know, because they want to show it, they want to document it for themselves. So what else, Christy?
This is a question from, let's see, it looks like it's from Mary Almagar about, David is talking a lot about large companies and how much savings he saw and the culture effect on a large company, but she has a company that is 10 employees, and she's interested to know whether or not we have figures on how much on average do smaller companies save by using BusyBusy?
We do. Yeah, we've done a lot of different case studies. Smaller company, smaller is a really relative to what other companies people are familiar with. So sometimes people consider a smaller company under 20 employees. Sometimes it's under 10. I can tell you the savings that we have noticed is we generally tie to a percentage. And it's very, very consistent regardless of the size of company because it's percentage based. And our average company increases their profit by 30% after using BusyBusy for 12 months. So one of the things that we've done in our research is we've noticed, just like David mentioned, is generally people don't know where to identify the savings and where we're making the biggest impact until they have a bunch of data. So it normally takes 3 months, 6 months, and then they start seeing all of the information, start seeing where some of the changes have come, and then they're able to make huge changes in what they're doing. And that's when the savings really aggressively ramp up. And that's why you generally, we're always really quick to clarify it's after 12 months of having the product that savings is generally 30%. Which reminded me, David, one thing that we didn't talk about in your savings. So you guys are saving, you're targeted to save over $500,000 this year because of the implementation of the smartphone. You're also going to make a ton more because not only are you saving 20% of that 40%, so half of the non-value time that you were wasting, but now that 20% of the total workday is being on the job site. Have you been able to tie a number yet to how much extra you're making? And then the other thing I think the audience would be curious to hear that we had mentioned that we were going to talk about earlier was, what are you guys doing as a company to incentivize the employees? How is that increased profit making their life easier? You mentioned some stuff about the warehouse improvements. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. I don't have a number for kind of the all other, getting more work done, being more profitable, because it has a ripple effect. There's less trucks that we have to buy. Ultimately, since we're able to get more work done during a day, it's going to result in us needing less people, right? As we grow, we've got more capacity to take on work, right? We don't have to hire as many people. And so that has all sorts of ripple effects when you think about, benefits administration and just, every person you add is going to cost money. So it ends up being it's going to be a big number, no matter what that is. So, but I don't actually have an exact number. Okay. What was the other point you wanted me to address? Sorry.
Just the warehouses, like the improvement for employees based on the revenue increase.
Sure. I think, from, again, I think it's similar to if we said tomorrow we're going to go back to paper timesheets, people would be frustrated by it because they like the ease of how they get to report their time now. If we started telling people, hey, we're going to have you start coming back to the shop and you're not going to be able to go directly to the job site, it's those changes that I think in the end, though resistant at first, they'd be frustrated, right? Because there's something, at the end of the, as eager as folks are to come in the morning and have a cup of coffee and talk with their coworkers and, have a relaxing time and then head up to a job site, at the end of the day, they want to get home. They've got families, they've got, places they want to go, things they want to do. And so, they're getting paid the same. And, we're making their lives easier. And frankly, if we're able to have fewer staff, ultimately we're going to invest in making our fewer number of staff members better, and they're all going to make more money because of it. Which again, that's going to be the end result, because we're going to have fewer better people that are going to make more money.
So there's a question in here for Eric. Christy, sorry, I'm going to let you. There's a couple questions that keep popping up that I'm like, oh, I want to make sure that one. I'll let you ask the rest of them. I'm gonna ask one more. Eric, there's someone on here that mentioned that they're looking at switching from QuickBooks and they don't really know what to look, and so they're wondering about foundation software. Is there anything specific you can tell them that helps them differentiate the two products and what foundation software does unique?
Yeah, I can't. I'm sorry, my video cut out after the technology thing, but I am still here. But I think the easiest way for me to describe this to people would be exactly what David's hitting with a lot of this job costing and being able to track the data. That's it right there. There's plenty of other things that I think provide advantages to what we're doing and what we can provide as a solution. But ultimately, if you want to grow or if you just want to get better at what you're doing, you really need to have that information. You really need to have that accurate job costing. And you really need something that's going to be able to help you out on the payroll side. Both things, kind of intertwined in David's answers, but having a payroll functionality or a payroll module that's designed specifically for construction and even more so specialty trades and self-performing GCs. I mean, there's a huge number of benefits that we'd love to get in there and show you guys it. But really, when you talk about the success David's been able to have, just from being able to look at the costs and the numbers and so forth, there's so many dollars tied to your payroll job costing and all that. You really need to be able to get good data, and you really need to be able to see it and track it appropriately. And I think that really starts with having an accounting software that fits there too. So we'd be happy to show you at any time. Go to foundationsoftware.com or my email's edv@foundationsoft.com. I'm not on the sales side, just hoping to provide you guys some information, but happy to get you guys whatever you need.
Alrighty, I've got a question here for David in regards to when you made the decision to bring BusyBusy on. I've got a question about whether or not you had to spend a lot of time in preparation for the rollout of using BusyBusy, and if you had any support from the BusyBusy staff as far as being able to work through that process.
Yeah, I mean, so to the second part, yeah, absolutely. There was a ton of support to onboard, go through and do the company settings, importing employees, importing jobs, renting jobs, or I guess projects. That's how they're called, BusyBusy. It really doesn't take that long. I mean, I think that even for us, where we literally have hundreds of jobs active at any one time, 90 employees. I mean, going through the setup, I don't know I don't think it took a month from start to finish. So, and it was pretty seamless. It's not, I think you've got to have some vision about the roles that you want to have, the hierarchy of staff levels. But beyond that, it's a pretty smooth and seamless switch or setup.
Great, thank you. And I think, Derek, this question is for you. I've got someone asking about whether or not BusyBusy offers any kind of daily report that they can share either internally or externally.
Okay, yeah, good question. So we do. The daily report is something that can be done on mobile or web. It's generally done out on the work site on mobile, and then it would be viewed by the office on web. So you can come into the actual reports themselves and you can review any of the daily reports right here. These would be the daily reports that have been created so far today. So if you can just come in here and you would look at who submitted those reports and what they look like. The nice thing is a lot of this information is auto-generated based on the weather because the geofence on that job site that day, any photos and notes that were taken on that project that day, how many employees were on site, if there were any injuries reported, job codes that were used. So this is where, like in Zander Solution, David and team would be able to look to see how many hours were attributed to travel, how many hours were actually spent doing the waterproofing on that particular job. The unique thing, and this is, I think, more so than anything, what was being asked, the unique thing about the daily report with BusyBusy is that's very, very different than any other software out there is most other software products that do a daily report, they have built their daily report first. And what they did was they copied the way that paper works. And so it doesn't necessarily make it a better process. It just makes it easier to access because it's on cloud. The thing that makes BusyBusy unique is we started with time tracking. We started with labor management. equipment information. And so when someone does a daily report with BusyBusy, it already has the information inside the software stored and aggregated. So traditionally, a software report would take a supervisor maybe 30 minutes to fill out. Whereas with BusyBusy, all you would do is you would come in, you would click here, you would click on a project that you want to build a report for. And then once that project is there, you would just say, Adobe, here's the daily report. And then you can create a report. When you create a report, you can see all of this information is already here. It's auto-populated. And as soon as you click preview or report, the information is all going to show up. It shows all of this information already. Every single person that's been on the job site, what they were doing. You click submit, it's stored in BusyBusy. If you want to share it with a GC, it's able to do there. If you want the supervisor signing off on it, it's all right there. And it takes a supervisor. And this is where, again, when you talk about the impact that we have on clients, a huge place again to save money and increase profit is have your expensive supervisors that you're paying a higher wage rate be more effective with their time. So at the end of the day, instead of them having to start at 4:30 to finish their daily report by 5, they can start their daily report at 4:55 and they're still done by 5. And it has better information that's more accurate because you're not getting these really rounded numbers of, hey, Tony worked 2 hours here and he traveled for 4 hours there. It's actually off of their punches. So like David had talked about, when companies are punching, when they're changing activities or when they're changing location, that information is aggregated onto the daily report here.
And I've got one last question from a user about how BusyBusy uses GPS, or how GPS is most often used within the system.
Okay, I'll keep this shorter answer here. So GPS is completely customizable. So you can decide whether you want to have GPS required, if you want it not required but turned on, or you can turn it off, and it's customizable per employee, not just per company. And the GPS works with the information that's already on the phone. So we took Apple and Google's technologies and we just overlay our technology on top of it, so it doesn't drain the battery or do anything different with GPS. It just, when an employee is clocked in, it gives the information when they have big location changes, so it breadcrumbs throughout the day and gives you the information you need to know that the employees are on the job site and that they're getting their work done. So Christy had mentioned this was the last question, so we'll let everybody go. I wanted to make sure and bring this up one last time. I won't share David's information. I'm assuming that if you want to connect with him, you could probably send him a LinkedIn message or something. But the majority here, if you're here looking to learn more about foundation software, or if you're looking to learn more about BusyBusy software, you can email these numbers here. You can also go directly to the BusyBusy website or to the foundation website. I think both products have chat forms and web forms where you can submit information to learn more about anything that we've talked about on this webinar. And yeah, just want to say thanks again to Eric and to David and to Christy. A special thanks to David. Really appreciate you joining us to tell our audience about your experience and helping the audience understand how smartphones can help improve their job sites.
No problem.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks again, Derek. Thanks again, David.
Thanks, everyone.